about the Pert-em-Heru. Let's talk about the Book of the Dead, as people like to say. But the Pert-em-Heru, let's have a question about it, and let's kind of ask some questions about it, and let's talk about it. Let's kind of jump into this book and this historic document and kind of bring together some of the things we've been talking about over the last few days and the last few videos and the last few live videos. So I hope you're doing well. God bless you. I want to thank you for joining me and working with me, and those who've been, tuning in and asking questions and participating and putting your comments down below. I love to see your comments and to read them, so I very much appreciate it. And I do want to ask, if you get a chance, you looking for ways to support, check out my book on Amazon, Stories About Black History. There's several volumes. There's a volume 1 that's an ebook. Volume 2 you can see in hard copy, as well as ebook, as well as volume 3. You can take a look at it. And there's a lot of stories about, African Americans and the African experience with respect to real stories that help bring home a lot of the things that a lot of people did that really, really let you know that there were amazing people in life and amazing people in our history who manifested a lot of wonderful things. So we don't have to look that far back in our history to find these things. So I want to talk about that, and I pray that you take a look at that and see that on Amazon, as well as Religion of the Black Land. I very much appreciate that. And Stories About Black History, volumes 2 and volume 3 by Dynasty Smith. So I very much appreciate that. So I hope you're doing well. So I want to talk a little bit about this whole Pert-em-Heru. We were talking about Haru last time. We had a chance to talk a little about who was Haru and what Haru mean. And prior to that, we talked about Heru, and we talked about Aset. And the whole idea, as you think about these deities, these different deities in Kemetic theology, think about them as different aspects of yourself. Don't think about them as different things or things wrong. Think about them as different parts of your own being, different parts of who you are, different parts of your spirit. Because we really need people, I believe, in this day and age to study the spirit. It's not that we shouldn't study other things. I like studying science. You can study anything, mathematics, whatever you want to study. But I think there's also a need for us to study the spirit. Because I think one of the problems that we have in this day and age is that, in particular in quote unquote modern societies or Western societies, whatever you want to call it, Western societies, we tend to think that, what we see is pretty much it. Even though we know there's a lot to life, and we found out there's a lot to life, even through studying science that we can't see, we tend to kind of deal with very things in very much objective types of ways. But that allows us, I think, to be in situations where we can't always deal with the things that come at us. And I think we don't really have a good understanding of who we are. A lot of times we think about our ability just in terms of what we can see and what we can feel and what we can lift, or how much money we have, or how many material things we have, or these particular things. We don't necessarily think about and touch on the fact that many things you do, many of the heroic things you do, many of the things that you are challenged with in life, they come from, and the ability to address them come from a part of you, a part of your spirit that is just remarkable. A part of you that taps into an energy and taps into a force, really your creative force. It taps into a force that allows you to bring outside of you, bring from the inside and out of you remarkable things. And so when you're dealing with a situation, let's say you're dealing with a loved one who's having a challenge, or you're dealing with a situation on your job, or you're dealing with your career, it's not always that you have to go outside to figure out how to deal with it. Many times you have to go inside and understand that sometimes the way you're thinking about things, the way you're looking at a situation, may just be because of negative beliefs. It may be because of negative things that have been feeding into you, and you're feeding into that belief and kind of, munching on that junk food, if you will, those negative beliefs, and it's allowing you to think that you can't deal with the situation. It's making you think, and it's making your actions follow what your mind, what your brain is kind of telling you. But you can start to say, I can reprogram that. I don't necessarily have to be defeated on my job. I don't necessarily have to be in a situation where my career is kind of going to put, or I'm having a challenge. Let me stop for a second, because this is what our ancestors were tapping into. Let me stop for a second, push away from those things that might be not good for me, those negative beliefs, those negative thoughts. Let me start to reprogram myself. Let me start to look at this in a different way. And how do you do that? One of the first things you start to do is start to realize your divinity. You start to realize that you're not just here from some, mundane purpose, or there's no meaning to life. You start to realize there's more to this. You start to look at the connections in your life. You start to see that nobody around me, nobody that I see, nobody that I've met, nobody who's ever existed actually created me. There were people involved in my creation, no doubt. Very special, wonderful people who participated and helped me get here. But they didn't actually do it. They didn't actually know what was going on. They didn't actually know how to create a cell and to make these atoms come to life, and to make these particles and forces become, human beings and living, breathing things. That's not something that people did. And with all the amazing things that people do in artificial intelligence, we're literally talking about making things that mimic us. or things that may be able to count faster, but still mimic our intelligence. And the fact that, and we consider ourselves to be intelligent because we can make something that we think can count faster than us, or quote unquote be more intelligent than us, but not stop and think that the thing that made us, that which made us, must also be intelligent because it made something incredible. It made something that can talk and think on its own. So there's a whole idea around stopping for a second and allowing yourself to be and to think of the divine. When you get outside of that, you're going to get into trouble. You're going to get into limitations. You're going to get into things that kind of stop you from moving forward. When you push that away and say, wait a minute, maybe I am divine. Let me start to think about what I am. And this is what Haru represents. This is what this whole idea of Haru represents, as we were talking about yesterday. Haru represents that part of you, that action in you, that courage to make that decision to say, I'm going to turn around my life and start to think about the divine. I'm going to think about it in terms of divinity. I'm going to start thinking about the divine in terms of myself. And when you start to put a divine tag on yourself, a divine view, a divine filter on you, on your very life, then you will start to say, wait a minute, I don't have as many limitations as I thought. Those things that I thought were bigger than me, those challenges, they're not as big because I'm divine. Hold up, I have ability. I'm actually a child of God. I'm actually created by the Most High God. These things, nothing is stopping me. Nothing is opposing me. I can actually address this challenge. I can actually rise to it. I don't have to be afraid of it. And then you start to say, wait a minute. And once you start to change your mind and your divinity, because that's literally what our ancestors were talking about. That's literally what the Kemetic people were talking about. That's literally what the Kushite people were talking about. Releasing yourself of these ideas of your limitations and looking at yourself as divine. So as we think about Haru, as we know, Haru was that aspect of God, was born from a Sar and a Set, the divinity of your expression and your divine discipline brings forth your courage and will. Haru was that representative, it was the representative of being a ruler on earth. How do you take over the rightful throne? And any of the rulers in ancient Kemet and so forth in Kush would see themselves as being a Haru on earth. And being a person who is standing in a divine right to rule that throne in place of a deity, in place of a perfect deity, and being able to make decisions that were for the benefit, that were inspired by God and for the benefit of the country. And think about that. When you activate that in your life, you are then making decisions for the benefit of you. Think about yourself starting to say, I'm going to start to change my life. I'm going to start to change the way I look at things and kind of put my own wings on. It's a falcon deity. Put my own wings on and begin to see myself in a divine way and start to make decisions that are good for me. Why can't you put yourself first? Why can't you do that? I think about Frederick Douglass, and I think about him when I think about Asar. And the reason why I put him up here, there's so many things in his life, and there's so many you may have read. You probably read The Narrative of the Life of Frederick Douglass. I have a copy of it on YouTube here. I kind of looked at that and did an audiobook with it. But at the end of the day, there's so many things in Frederick Douglass's life. And if you know that he lived in Maryland, he was born in Maryland, and he was enslaved, and so many things happened to him. To the point where he didn't really see his mom but a very few times in his life, and can only remember seeing her at night because she had to walk 12 miles from the plantation where she was being enslaved just to go to see her children who were being held at another plantation by the man who owned them, who was probably most likely Frederick Douglass's father, and who had raped and attacked her other sisters, right? So he has all these experiences and being beaten by somebody who was trying to break him. He had chances in his life where he could have given up. He had chances in his life where he could have said, you know what, this is too hard. I'm not going to try to escape. And he talks about in his book, he talks about, his decision and the burning desire, right? That burning desire he had in his heart to be free, like something he knew that something was special to life. He knew that there was something more for him. He couldn't say what, and he says in his book, he said, I would be remiss and I'm paraphrasing, I would be remiss if I did not say that I believe that there was a divine hand, that I thought that there was a divine hand in me being able to be free and all these things happening, because he even tried to orchestrate an escape when he was on the eastern shore of Maryland, and he coordinated with a few people, and one of them somebody ratted him out, and he ended up being attacked and captured, and he had to chew and try to eat the paper and throw one of the pieces of paper in the fire when they were being captured at the plantation where they were being held. And remarkably, after him trying to leave and being ratted out, but them not exactly finding the evidence because one of them ate it and the other one threw it in the fire. Remarkably, he wasn't sold down the South. Remarkably, he was sold back to or given back to Baltimore, people in Baltimore, and that's where he eventually made his escape. And he talks about all these different things that could have made his life different. And he says, you know what? I would be remiss if I did not say that I did not think that there was a divine hand in me being able to be free, that there was something more in my life. And I believe he said, and I know people will somehow, mock at that and kind of, poo-poo that. He said, but, I don't care. I'd rather endure their hatred and their mockery than endure my own disrespect and my own aberration for not being and telling the truth. I don't care if they mock me for believing that God had a hand in me being free. I would rather them mock me and deal with their teasing than to deal with my own doubting of what I know to be true in my spirit. Think about that for a second. Here was a man saying, I believe that somehow I was going to be free. I believe that something, and there were things that happened in my life that I couldn't control. He could not understand why he would not have been sold further down to Georgia when he was going to make his first attempt and they got found out, but they didn't quite know all the evidence. He didn't understand how he ended up back in Baltimore. He didn't understand how he was able to find the strength, right, to fight the person who was supposed to beat him. And there was a whole story behind that, which we'll talk about one day, where he met a gentleman who was African who was also enslaved and told him to take some roots and put it in his pocket. And as long as he had those roots in his pocket, no one would ever beat him again. And whether that gave him the courage to fight back on that famous time. But many things happened in his life that he felt there was a divine hand. And he said, I'd be lying if I didn't tell you. And I would rather, deal with somebody else's mockery of what I believe to be true than to deal with my own disappointment in myself for not telling the truth, my own aberration. And think about that. So here's this man saying that there's a divine hand in my life. How many times in your own life has something happened where you just know in your chest, you just know that there's something you should do. There's something more to life. If there's something that's been tapping into you, it's kind of moving you forward. God bless you, King. God bless you. So you said, Jabbar Thomas, hope you're doing well. Thank you so much. I appreciate you joining. Hotep and greeting, Brother Consu. I appreciate it. Sorry for that. Category of rituals and how does, one of the whole idea, we may touch on it. So I'm sorry to hear that, Brother Consu, that your father passed away. And, one of the things, and a lot of us are probably, God bless you, thank you so much, is a lot of people are probably, dealing with a lot of things right now. I'll just mention, since we're talking about the Book of the Dead at Pert-em-Heru, there are a lot of rituals that are there. And then obviously, we probably don't have access to the same type of things they had access to in terms of the way we handle funerals today. But one of the biggest things for me is to believe and know that person's spirit is still alive, is to know that the essence of who they are. I don't believe when you're dead, you're gone. And from a Kemetic standpoint, from a Kushite standpoint, they didn't believe it either. The whole essence of who you are, the whole essence of what's inside you is encompassed in this body, but not contained in the body, not confined to the body forever. And you know that, man, if you've ever been in a situation where you've seen somebody, and I've seen someone, a close family member, a long time ago, who was in a situation where they were, basically being kept alive by machinery and medicine, letting their bodily functions take place, but they were essentially brain dead or essentially not there. And I thought to myself, wow, the body to some extent is functioning. They're still, passing waste and certain things like that. They're still breathing, even though they're being helped to breathe. The body is still alive, but the spirit is gone. And it's one of these things that, at times when you're thinking about these things, when you start to deal with things spiritual, which we'll get into right here, when you start to deal with things that are spiritual, you're going to deal with things that are subtle, things that are not so objective, things that are kind of underneath the iceberg. We're saying that things that are divine, that give breath to and give life to where we are. And that whole concept of the breath of life, that whole concept of things being kind of more subtle and things being deeper. That's what our ancestors were dealing with. And one of the best things I could say to you is to be in a quiet place, is to be quiet, be still and listen. There's a song that says, listen more often to things and to beings. Sweet Honey in the Rock sings that song by Sweet Honey in the Rock. But to be quiet and listen. And when you listen and you seek it, you'll find it. Pray. There are different mantras you could do. Ong. Some people do Tehu or Hong. Pray, do those type of mantras, and you just kind of hold your breath and do the mantras on, and you begin to listen and ask the questions. If you stop and listen and be quiet, you will find that your spirit will speak to you. You will find that the essence of who that is there. If you fill yourself with a lot of things and it's probably a busy time for you, sorry to hear that your father passed. it's going to be kind of challenging to stop and listen. But the quicker you can do it, the more that you accept that this person is not gone, and try to do their essence, because whatever vision you have of that person, the best that you had, the best vision, the most exciting thing that they told you, the best interaction you have that in your mind. Whatever they taught you in your life, whatever you got from them, have that vision in your mind when you think about them, when you talk to them, when you interact with them. That to me keeps that person alive and allows us to connect with people on the other side. So we'll even get a chance to deal with that more. I hope that's a little bit helpful. Yes, they let yet live. And it's a hard thing to say, right? When you're dealing with it, I know it's a hard thing to say, but I think it's the truth. And literally, that's what our ancestors were taught. When we think about the Book of the Dead, when we think about this whole idea of the Pert-em-Heru, this is literally dealing with how a person continues to live on and their study of the spirit. And when I think about it, that whole idea of studying the spirit becomes very significant. So I hope I can answer your question again as we move on and through this, because the concept of this is that your spirit has many aspects to it. When you think about Haru and Asa and Set and all these different things you may think about, understand that these are all manifestations of your parts of your spirit. Just like you have a trillion cells in your body, many billions and billions of cells in your body, individual cells that all make you up, different organs that themselves are made up of billions of cells, different parts of you that organize together to perform different functions. Your spirit is very similar. They're parts of your spirit. And I wish we would get into having more of us, even from an African perspective and from Black perspectives, to study spirituality and to have our voices heard, because this is where the rubber meets the road. When you deal with somebody who passes away, when you deal with a significant challenge in your career, when you deal with a challenge in your family, when you deal with a challenge with yourself or a sickness or things that really rock your life, here's where you got to dig deep. And the whole idea and the whole concept behind it is that there are different aspects of your spirit. And when you think about your mind, as I was mentioning the other day, your mind is kind of in the middle, or more kind of akin to your spirit on that side. If you think about the spiritual being on this side, all the way to our men, to the hidden, to the deity itself, all the way to your physical being on the other side, your mind is kind of akin to your spirit, closer to your spirit. And that part of you that gets to make the decision of whether or not to listen to your spirit, whether or not to do like Frederick Douglas did and say, I believe there's a divine calling. It's something's happening in my life, and I'm going to take that leap of faith and try this. I'm going to go ahead. I could die doing it, but I'm going to try it. And he was right. He had a divine calling on his life, and he was right. Sojourner Truth felt the same way. Harriet Tubman felt the same way. They felt the same way that they had a calling on their life, if you kind of think about it. And they had the very same type of feeling where they went for it, right? They had the same type of feeling where they were like, I'm going to go for this, and I'm not just going to stop and let one thing, stop me. There's a calling on my life. And I think that when you start to accept that, when you start to accept that we are essentially spiritual beings, that our lives and our existence goes beyond our body in this lifetime, and that there are ways we can touch people who've been here before and who've just passed on, and that you don't have to accept limitations in your life when you have challenges. You go inside your spirit to be able to find the strength and the guidance and the wherewithal to do what you need to do. That's what it's all about, and that's what Haru is all about. And the Book of the Dead, so to speak, is literally the book of coming forth by day. And I like that when you think with that Pert-em-Heru is literally coming forth by day. When I think about that, I know people have different interpretations of the Pert-em, with the coming forth by day. I look at it as being coming forth by Haru. I know we can look at that from the perspective of Haru and the sun and that type of thing, but I look at it from the standpoint of coming forth, you coming out of your shell, you coming forth into your divinity by way of your decisions, by way of your courage. Just like Frederick Douglas had to do, coming forth into your divinity by way of your courage. Something's going to scare you. Something may scare you about your father's death and about the passing, but there may be an aspect of a courage of it that you got to step on the other side and face up to and deal with, to be able to get the lesson or go on the other side, whatever your progress is as a result of this transition, as a result of this happening in your life. To me, it's about being able to come forth into whatever you need through that courage and through that aspect of you that is Haru. So I say, look at it. I say, step into it. I say, embrace it. It's time for us to study it. Not just look at one thing of it, but to actually study this spirituality and to look at ourselves and to know there's a certain part of me that is courage. There's a certain part of me that is my heart. There's a certain part of me that's going to be an energy that moves me forward. There's a certain part of me that's going to be somewhat cerebral, right? That's going to deal with things in a logical and even in a spiritual fashion, right? There's a part of me. There's a certain part of me that I can't even define. There's a certain part of it that will move me forward, or things that will coordinate my life that sometimes I can't even define, that seem beyond my ability to define. But it's literally part of me. It's an energy that moves me forward. And there's also parts of me that are physical, right? That are very much physical and that feel things. So I have this whole range of things that are a part of who I am. And that at the end of the day, I don't necessarily identify as my body. I'm actually perceiving and the one looking at and understanding and taking all this in. We talk about artificial intelligence in terms of that being significant, because it has the ability to take all this information, parse it, actually kind of think through it. Think through it and pick out a good solution to as an answer to your question. Well, we almost are putting like a consciousness or associating some type of intelligence with this program, right? With these programs. But at the end of the day, you yourself are also looking out at the world and parsing all the things that are happening to you in your, and that's who you are. That's how you experience the world. It's how you perceive it. And when you start to understand that things are subtle, it becomes much more significant. So I kind of want to jump into this a little bit as we were thinking about the Pert-em-Heru and just kind of jumping into like some of the things it says. And it was interesting because I wanted to pull up this one document. It talks about just the Pert-em-Heru, and it talks about just Ani. And as we talk about, you probably know the Papyrus of Ani. A lot of times in Kemetic thought and Kemetic deity, from a Kemetic deity standpoint, a lot of people, even in the Book of the Dead, the Pert-em-Heru, that person, whoever that person will be, whether it's Ani, the scribe we're talking about today, or anybody else, that person will be called an Asar. So think about that. Think about one of the most significant deities that you can think about. And as you pass away, you being referred to, or your loved one, right? Your father, your loved one being referred to as that deity. You were coming, even though you're coming before Asar, and the Book of the Dead talks about the Great Hall of Judgment, it refers to the person who is the deceased as an Asar. The Asar Ani, or the Asar Hatshepsut, or the Asar whoever that person may be. And imagine it could be the Asar John, the Asar you, right? The Asar Brother Kansu, the Asar Jabbar. You have manifested. And in order for you to be called an Asar, you have to be able to, in one respect, understand the various aspects of your spirit. So this is an actual like depiction of part of the Book of the Dead and the Judgment Hall, like the most famous part of the Book of the Dead, the Pert-em-Heru, the coming forth by day. And here you see the person, the deceased person. You can see very bottom left-hand corner, that very bottom left-hand corner where you see the deities kind of sitting with their knees kind of bent. At the bottom of those are the negative confessions. Those are the declarations of innocence. So those are the last several ones, going up to the 42nd one on the very last hand side, until you see the vignettes there, and you see the deities Ma'at and the two ladies, and you see the Asar Ani before Osiris, and you see below that you see Tahuti weighing the heart of the deceased person against a feather, and you see Tahuti kind of capturing the aspects of this person's life and whether or not they speak truth. So this person, imagine this person is coming through the hall of judgment. He is declaring, and he's being called an Asar, someone who lives out truth, not just, speaking, living it through everything you do. That's when you begin to be light as a feather. That's when you begin to be able to touch, when you deal with very significant things like your father passing or very significant. You begin to say, how do I take this thing that just happened and begin to apply it to my life so I begin to live truth? And how do I begin to move forward? And a lot of the things with respect to that. So this person is walking through the hall of judgment, and this person is saying and declaring, you know what? I've been respectful to you, deities. I've been respectful to you, Ma'at. I've been respectful to you, various deities. I have not lied. I have not made someone to feel fear. I've not killed some person. I've not defiled somebody's spouse, somebody's wife or husband. I've not stolen from the things that belong to God. This person is going through saying, I've been an honest person. I've done these things. I've not done these bad things. And because of that, and because I've given you your due, I am now coming on this side of it, asking you to judge my heart, asking you to see, am I worthy to be able to partake in the things that are peaceful in the hereafter? And that's where the heart is being weighed, as you see down in the third vignette from the bottom, and Tahuti looking at the way of the heart. This person is walking through the hall of judgment, declaring their innocence, declaring what they did with their life, and showing you that you can be at peace, that you can have benefit in the afterlife. And from a Kemetic perspective and a Kushite perspective, it is always connected with your morality. Did you do good? Did you do things on earth to help people? Did you do things when you had the ability to and the opportunity to? Did you help people? Did you give back? Did you build up your own soul? Did you give the things that belong to God? Did you manifest God in your life? Did you fulfill your purpose? Did you hear the same thing, the same calling that Frederick Douglas and Harriet Tubman and Sojourner Truth heard? Did you hear your calling and did you answer it? Did you hear the calling and did you answer it? And what you're saying on the other side, what the person is saying in the Pert-em-Heru is, I did that. I heard my calling and I answered it. I listened to what you had to say. I heard the words of my ancestors. I respected the words of my ancestors. I gave to God what belonged to God. I sacrificed, and the sacrifice is just a way to show that you are giving, that you are understanding what's significant in your purpose. It's a physical way of showing it. And you were asking about rituals earlier and some things about rituals. One of the major rituals that were done, God bless you so much. One of the major rituals that were done, thank you, Mythical Legends. One of the things that were done was a lot of times the deceased would live on and be connected with and connected to by members of the family, bringing rituals to the deceased, bringing rituals to them. I heard my colleague, this is why I teach, there you go, very much, King, I heard my colleague, this is why I teach. The deceased family had a very important role in making sure that person's life continued on. So you were asking, like, what are some of the rituals that you might do? And the opening of the mouth and the ceremony and some of those things, were rituals that they did because they had access to the person's, your body, and they had access to rituals. And the priest would perform certain rituals and say prayers along with that to help ensure that person's body and heart were being taken care of in the afterworld, and in the afterlife. And obviously, in a lot of ways today, we don't have access to that. We're not doing that here. But one of the things that's significant that you see all throughout, Kemetic history and other parts of Africa and other parts of the world is that the deceased person's family kept up that person's memory. And one of the things they did was they prepared food. Food was a very important part of it. Things that the person might like or things the person might need in the afterlife, in particular on special days. So if you can think about special days that were special days to you and your father, or special days that were special days of the year, times of the year, where you would remember that person, whether you leave out food for them, you say a prayer for them, you in some way connect with them on a regular basis at special times and on special days to help keep their memory alive. And you will see things happening. You will see things manifest in your life in terms of that person's memory. And it's a way to keep those rituals alive. It's a way to keep that person alive without trying to ignore them and walk away from the power that's there and the access you have to that ancestors. And the ancestral access is power, right? Access to it. So that whole idea was that the Book of the Dead was literally you being able to come forth, you answering that calling, and you being able to take this whole concept of Haru. And I love the fact that Haru is represented by like a bird of prey. A magnificent bird. If you ever seen a falcon or some of these birds of prey in real life, they're magnificent. And one of the things obviously they can do is they can see from very far away. They can see their prey from very far away, from very high altitudes, and be able to swoop down and get. There's so many aspects of it. And you can tell me what you think, because I'd love to hear your thoughts about why you think they use this type of bird and this type of bird of prey as a symbol of Haru. Is it the flying, the ability to be free? We a lot of times assume and associate freedom with flight, but also that ability sometimes to see things that might seem out of reach that are totally within your reach. From a perspective of Frederick Douglass, as we're talking about him within the context of this, he saw in the distant part of his future, in his heart, when he was a young man in Maryland and in Baltimore and the Eastern Shore, that somehow he might be free. He didn't know how, and at times he got really, down about it, but somehow he thought there was going to be a better day for him. And it seemed far off, but it was totally within his reach. He totally could do it because he did it, right? He totally had to take that chance to dress up as a sailor and to get on a train on that day and sneak away and go north to Delaware and to Philadelphia and finally to New York. He had to do that, and he had to kind of see and reach for something that might seem far away, but that was totally in his reach. When you're thinking about Haru and the whole idea of coming forth by day and the book of coming forth by day, it's going to be your courage. It's going to be your will, your own courage and your own decisions that help you push forward to an area that you never thought you might be able to be, to an area where you will think of yourself like a hero. Like a Haru. You won't need to look at other people to say, wow, they are great. You'll be able to look at yourself. You should be. I want us to be able, you should be able to look at yourself. I want us to be able to look at ourselves and see the greatness that we think we see in other people. Imagine you see it in yourself. You don't have to look at somebody else on TV or wait for a ball game to come on or wait for somebody to stand in front of a podium for you to feel good or to see greatness. See greatness in yourself. That's what our ancestors is about. When you think about the Pert-em-Heru, they're not just talking. It wasn't just for one person. This person here is a scribe. It wasn't just for one person. It wasn't just for for the king or for the queen. You could have been a priestess or a scribe, or you could have been many different types of people who would have been called an Asar. This divinity can reach you no matter where you are. So I hope you think about it, that the whole idea is to manifest your divinity, and the whole idea is to do it by the choices you make and the courage that are associated with your choices. And you don't have to walk about it. You don't have to walk away from it. You don't have to be afraid of it. You don't have to be scared of it. You don't have to wait for somebody else for your greatness. You can be great in yourself. So I'd love to hear what your thoughts are down below. I'm going to look at the comments to see what some of the comments are. God bless you. Holy Spirit's blessed to you. Agape love. So I hope that you are doing. God bless you. And I'm loving to hear, people, the family, we think about it. We mentioned here at King's Camps that the family must pass on their loved ones. They must pass on their loved one's story. It's up to us. It's up to the living to, they've done their part. A lot of our ancestors have done their part. And they've kind of done what they need to do, and we need to move forward. So we need to move forward. And I hope that in some way, I don't know if I've answered some of your question, Brother Kansu. So just want to, say prayers and with you, and prayers and thoughts with you. So I hope that you are doing well, you and your family. Just thoughts and prayers with you, Brother Kansu. So prayers with you, and hopefully, I don't know if that was, hopefully that answered a little bit of your thoughts. The whole idea of, in some ways, because you're making very good points. In some ways, we have to recreate our traditions. Because for me, I know that it's very significant, and they had a long time to be able to develop the rituals that they developed. And sometimes, we may not be able to go back 5,000 years ago and be able to do exactly what they did. But I think the spirit is still here. The things that we have in our life are still here, and there are things that we can mimic, because the whole idea was the connection. The whole idea was that it's up to us to interact, that we can utilize the power that our ancestors have to impact us today. And so sometimes we might do things that might look a little different, it might feel a little different, but have the same effect and the same impact with it. So I hope that's helpful. Just a little bit. So God bless you. So I think about that, and I kind of want to wrap it up and think about from the standpoint of greatness, that your greatness and who you are, that you don't have to wait for somebody else. That the whole idea of coming forth by Haru, the Haru and the deity that's in you is inside of you, and you don't have to wait for it in anybody else. It can come forth inside you, and it's in everybody. Everybody has the ability to Nobody is better than. Everybody has the ability to manifest it, and the universe is big enough to be able to have us all do it. And I just pray that you're able to tap into your greatness, that we're all able to do that, because that, at the end of the day, is what's on the other side of our challenges, and the other side of our courage is the greatness that we all attain to. So I want to thank you so much for joining me. God bless you. Hope you're having a happy Thanksgiving. I hope you're having a happy time with your family. And God bless you. I want to thank you for joining me. Talk to you soon. God bless you.